Ambassador Qualix of the Galactic Council had overseen 47 first contact missions in his distinguished career. Peaceful herbivore species, gentle aquatic civilizations, even a few mildly aggressive rock-eaters who turned out to be delightful dinner companions once you got past their habit of literally eating the furniture. But this was his first encounter with what the Xenobiology Department had classified as a Class 5 apex predator species. He was beginning to think retirement looked very, very appealing. The humans had requested the meeting at something called a community center, which sounded innocent enough until Quelix realized it was basically a gathering place where hundreds of these terrifying creatures voluntarily assembled. His security detail of 12 Zentorian shock troops was currently hiding behind what humans called a jungle gym, which was apparently a torture device designed to train their young in the art of climbing and strategic positioning. Quelix was starting to understand why Earth's application to join the Galactic Council had 17 different warning labels attached to it. 2 humans approached the landing zone, and Quelix immediately noted their predatory gait. Confident, purposeful, definitely carnivorous. The first one, who had introduced himself as Jake Morrison, stood roughly 6 feet tall with the kind of easy smile that Quelix had learned to associate with apex predators right before they struck. His companion, Alex Rivera, was slightly shorter, but moved with the same fluid grace that suggested excellent muscle coordination and lightning-fast reflexes. "Welcome to Earth," Jake called out, raising one hand in what Quelix briefing materials had identified as either a greeting or a territorial display. "Hope you had a good trip. Can we get you anything? Water, snacks, coffee?" Quelix's universal translator nearly short-circuited trying to process the word snacks. His xenobiology training kicked in immediately. Offering food was classic predator behavior, designed to establish dominance and identify which prey species might be easiest to consume later. The humans were literally announcing their intentions to eat the diplomatic party. We require no sustenance at this time," Quelix managed, his voice climbing several octaves higher than he'd intended. Behind him, he could hear his security detail arguing in whispers about whether their plasma rifles would even work against creatures this evolutionarily advanced. Alex laughed, and the sound made 3 of Quelix's guards immediately begin composing what were probably their final letters home. "Jake, I think you're freaking them out," Alex said, still grinning. "Maybe we should tone down the enthusiasm a bit." "What? We're being friendly," Jake replied, then turned back to Quelix with that same terrifying smile. "Sorry, we're just excited to meet you guys. This is pretty amazing, right? First contact and all that? I mean, what are the odds?" Quelix watched in fascination and horror as Jake gestured enthusiastically while speaking. The constant movement, the animated expressions, the way both humans maintained direct eye contact without showing any submission signals whatsoever. Every single behavior screamed apex predator, so loudly that Quelix was amazed his translator hadn't simply given up and started playing soothing music instead. This was going to be a very long day. 3 hours into what Jake had optimistically called a cultural exchange, Quelix was beginning to think his species' average lifespan of 400 years might have been a serious overestimate. At least for him, personally, on this particular day. The humans had insisted on demonstrating something called recreational activities, which Quelix now realized was probably some kind of ritualized combat training disguised as entertainment. They'd moved to an outdoor area where Jake was explaining the concept of sports, while Alex set up what appeared to be a portable weapons testing facility, or as Alex called it, volleyball net. "So, basically," Jake was saying, gesturing toward a spherical object that looked suspiciously like a miniature planet, "you hit the ball over the net, and the other team tries to hit it back. First team to miss loses." Quelix nodded frantically, taking notes. Competitive territorial disputes, pack hunting simulation, possibly ritualized warfare designed to establish dominance hierarchies. This was exactly the kind of intelligence the Galactic Council needed. "To give it a try?" Alex asked, bouncing the ball casually in one hand. The motion was hypnotic and deeply unsettling. "It's fun. Great exercise, too." Before Quelix could explain that his species considered exercise to be a form of voluntary self-harm, Alex tossed the ball into the air and jumped. For a moment, he seemed to defy gravity entirely, his arm drawn back like some kind of biological siege weapon. Then he brought his hand down in a motion so violent that Quelix's security detail immediately raised their weapons. The ball shot across the net like a guided missile. Jake dove to intercept it, moving with reflexes that would have made a Zentarian shock trooper weep with envy. He managed to get both hands on the ball, but his momentum carried him forward and he crashed into one of the metal support posts with a sickening crunch. "Jake!" Alex's voice cracked like a whip as he vaulted over the net in a single fluid motion. This was it, Quelix realized. This was the moment his xenobiology textbooks had warned him about, the moment when the pack turned on its wounded member, the moment when these apex predators would reveal their true nature by eliminating the weak link in their group. He activated his recording device and prepared to document the violent efficiency of human pack dynamics for posterity. Jake was on the ground, clutching his shoulder and making sounds that Quellex's translator identified as expressions of pain and distress. Perfect prey behavior. Alex approached, and Quellex held his breath, waiting for the inevitable display of predatory ruthlessness. Instead, Alex dropped to his knees beside Jake, his face twisted with what looked suspiciously like concern. "Don't move," Alex said, his voice suddenly sharp and commanding. "That sounded like something popped. We need to get you checked out." Quellex blinked. This was not standard apex predator protocol at all. "We have medical facilities aboard our vessel," Dr. Vortek announced, stepping forward with his portable trauma kit. As the expedition's chief medical officer, he'd been looking forward to studying human physiology firsthand, preferably from a safe distance. "Our scanners can assess the damage and provide appropriate treatment." Alex looked up sharply, and Dr. Vortek immediately took 3 steps backward. The human's eyes had gone flat and cold in a way that made every survival instinct Vortek possessed start screaming simultaneously. "No," Alex said, in a tone that could have flash-frozen liquid nitrogen. "Nobody touches him except me." "But our medical technology is far more advanced than," Vortek began. "I said no." Alex's voice dropped another octave, and Kellic watched in fascination as the human positioned himself between Jake and the medical team. Classic territorial behavior, protecting the injured pack member from potential threats. Except, that made no sense if humans were supposed to abandon their weak. "Alex, it's okay," Jake managed, still pale but attempting to sit up. "I think I just dislocated my shoulder. Nothing's broken." "Stay still," Alex commanded, then looked directly at Dr. Vortek. "Do you have ice? Something cold?" Vortek fumbled with his equipment. "I have a cryogenic stabilization unit that could—" "ACE," Alex repeated, his patience clearly wearing thin. "Frozen water, in a bag or towel." This was getting worse by the minute. The human was demanding tools for what could only be torture. Vortek had read about species that used extreme temperatures to inflict pain on their enemies, but he'd never imagined he'd witness it firsthand. "Here," Vortek said, producing a small thermal pack that could be configured for either heating or cooling. "But I must protest this barbaric—" Alex snatched the pack, activated the cooling function, and gently pressed it against Jake's shoulder. Jake immediately sighed in relief. "Thanks, man. That helps." Vortek stared in confusion. "You're providing comfort to the injured party?" "Of course I am," Alex snapped. "What kind of question is that?" He turned his attention back to Jake, his voice becoming gentle again. "Can you move your fingers? Any tingling or numbness?" Jake wiggled his fingers experimentally. "Everything works. Just hurts like hell." "Okay. I'm going to feel around the joint to see if anything's out of place," Alex said, then looked up at the ring of alien faces surrounding them. "This might look violent, but I'm trying to help him. Nobody panic." Quellex activated his translator's emergency medical protocol as Alex began what he called palpating the injury site. To alien eyes, it looked like Alex was systematically torturing Jake by pressing and prodding the damaged area, while Jake made increasingly distressed sounds. "There," Alex said, his fingers finding a particular spot that made Jake yelp. "Your shoulder's definitely out of the socket. I can pop it back in, but it's going to hurt." "Pop it back in?" Dr. Vortek's voice rose to a near shriek. "You're going to deliberately cause more trauma to the injured tissue?" "It's called reducing a dislocation," Alex explained with the patience of someone talking to a particularly slow child. "If I don't do it, his shoulder will heal wrong and he'll have problems for the rest of his life." The rest of his life. Vortek felt faint. The humans weren't just torturing their wounded for sport. They were planning long-term psychological damage. "Jake, you ready?" Alex asked, positioning himself carefully. "Do it." Alex gripped Jake's arm and shoulder, then made a swift, precisely controlled movement. There was a wet popping sound that made half the alien observers immediately reach for their emergency rations, followed by Jake's sharp intake of breath. Then Jake rolled his shoulder experimentally and grinned. "Perfect. Thanks, Alex. You always were better at this than the team medics." Quellex stared at the two humans in complete bewilderment. The torture session had somehow resulted in Jake's obvious relief and improved mobility. Alex was now helping Jake to his feet with the kind of careful support that looked suspiciously like caring. This was either the most sophisticated psychological warfare he'd ever witnessed, or his entire understanding of predator species needed a complete overhaul. Dr. Vortak had insisted on setting up a mobile medical monitoring station, partly for scientific observation, and partly because he was convinced the humans were going to do something spectacularly violent at any moment. What he got instead was possibly the most boring 3 days of his professional career, and also the most confusing. Jake had been moved to what Alex called the guest quarters aboard the human facility, which was apparently just a comfortable room with a bed, some furniture, and what humans referred to as entertainment systems. Alex had immediately claimed the chair next to Jake's bed and, as far as Vortak could tell, hadn't left it except for brief trips to something called a bathroom. Day 3 of observation, Vortak dictated to his recorder. Subject Alex continues to maintain position near injured pack member Jake. No signs of aggression, abandonment, or territorial displacement. Behavior remains inexplicable. Through the monitoring station's external sensors, he watched Alex adjust Jake's pillows for the 16th time that day. Jake was clearly conscious and capable of moving on his own, but Alex continued to anticipate his needs with an efficiency that bordered on the supernatural. "You hungry?" Alex asked, not looking up from the tablet he was reading. "Yeah, actually. Could you grab me a sandwich from the cafeteria? Turkey or ham?" "Surprise me." Alex stood up, stretched, and headed for the door. He paused at the threshold and looked back. "Need anything else while I'm up? More water? Different pillow? Want me to close the blinds?" "I'm fine, Alex. Stop fussing." "I'm not fussing," Alex replied, in the tone of someone who was definitely fussing. "I'm being attentive to your recovery needs." Vortak watched this exchange with growing bewilderment. According to every xenobiology text he'd ever read, apex predators were supposed to be ruthlessly efficient. They eliminated weakness, conserved energy, and focused on their own survival above all else. They definitely didn't spend 3 days hand-delivering sandwiches and adjusting pillows. "Dr. Vortak," came Ambassador Quelek's voice through the comm system. "Status report, sir. I'm beginning to think our classification system might need some adjustments." "Explain." Vortak glanced at his readings again. "The human Alex has maintained constant vigilance over the injured Jake for 72 hours. He's brought food, adjusted environmental controls, provided entertainment materials, and even engaged in something called small talk for extended periods. This behavior is completely inconsistent with predatory pack dynamics. Perhaps it's a form of psychological torture. Sir, Jake appears to be enjoying himself. He's been laughing regularly." There was a long pause. "Laughing?" "Yes, sir. Apparently humans find something called terrible movies to be a source of shared amusement. They've watched 14 of them." Through the sensors, Vortak observed Alex returning with not just a sandwich, but also what appeared to be some kind of dessert and a hot beverage. Jake's face lit up when he saw the additional items. "You got me pie? Cherry. Your favorite." "Alex, you didn't have to." "Shut up and eat your pie." Jake grinned and accepted the food with obvious pleasure. Alex settled back into his chair and resumed reading, but Vortak noticed the human's attention kept drifting back to Jake, monitoring his comfort level with the kind of subtle awareness that suggested deep familiarity and genuine concern. "Ambassador," Vortak said slowly, "I think we might have made a fundamental error in our assessment." "What kind of error?" "We classified humans as apex predators based on their physical capabilities, competitive behavior, and territorial instincts. But we didn't account for the possibility that their pack bonding might be stronger than their predatory instincts." "Are you suggesting they're not dangerous?" Vortak watched Alex help Jake adjust his position so he could eat more comfortably, the movement careful and gentle, despite the obvious strength in those hands. "Oh, they're definitely dangerous, sir. But I don't think they're dangerous to each other. At least, not to pack members they've accepted. Makes no evolutionary sense. Unless," Vortak said, the pieces finally clicking together in his mind, "their pack bonding is what made them so successful as a species. What if their loyalty to each other is exactly what allowed them to become apex predators in the first place?" On the screen, Jake had fallen asleep, and Alex was quietly clearing away the empty dishes. Before leaving, he adjusted the blanket over Jake's shoulders and dimmed the lights. For the first time in 3 days, Vortak thought he might be starting to understand what they were really looking at. Jake woke up on the 4th day feeling considerably more human and significantly less like he'd been hit by a small spacecraft. The first thing he saw was Alex, slumped sideways in that uncomfortable chair, drooling slightly on his own shoulder while clutching a tablet that displayed what appeared to be a half-finished crossword puzzle. "You know there's a perfectly good bed in the other room, right?" Jake said, his voice still rough from sleep. Alex jerked awake so fast he nearly launched the tablet into orbit. "What?" "I'm awake. I was just resting my eyes. How's the shoulder? Any pain? Stiffness? Do you need more ice?" I can get more ice. Alex, you look like death warmed over in a microwave. Gee, thanks. Your bedside manner needs work. Jake grinned and carefully sat up, testing his range of motion. The shoulder was still tender, but the sharp, grinding pain had faded to a dull ache. Seriously, though, you've been babysitting me for 3 days. Go get some real sleep. I haven't been babysitting, Alex protested, running a hand through his disheveled hair. I've been providing medical supervision and emotional support during your recovery period. You brought me 17 different kinds of soup. You said you were hungry. I said that once, 3 days ago. Details. Through the monitoring station, Dr. Vortak was frantically taking notes, while Ambassador Quelix watched the exchange with the expression of someone whose entire worldview was crumbling in real time. Sir, Vortak whispered into his communicator, are you observing this? Unfortunately, yes. Jake swung his legs over the side of the bed and stood up, moving cautiously but steadily. Alex immediately rose as well, hovering within arm's reach like some kind of anxious mother hen with opposable thumbs and an engineering degree. I'm fine, Jake said, catching Alex's worried expression. Look, full range of motion. He demonstrated by carefully lifting his arm over his head, wincing only slightly. Don't overdo it. The ligaments are still healing, and if you tear something else, I'm going to have to explain to your sister why you're coming home in a sling. My sister already thinks you're a bad influence on me. My sister is a very wise woman, who clearly has excellent judgment. Jake laughed, and the sound made Vortek nearly drop his recording equipment. It wasn't the cold, calculated amusement of a predator playing with its prey. It was warm, genuine, and completely unguarded. The kind of sound that suggested safety, comfort, and deep trust. Speaking of which, Jake continued, she wanted me to ask if you're still planning to drive down for her wedding next month. Of course I am. I'm the best man, remember? I've got a whole speech planned about your questionable life choices, and that time you tried to impress a girl by eating nothing but hot sauce for a week. You are not telling that story at my sister's wedding. Oh, I absolutely am. I've been saving it for special occasions. Alex grinned, and for the first time in days the tension left his shoulders. Jake noticed immediately. Hey, he said, his voice gentling. I'm okay, really. You don't have to keep watching me like I'm going to spontaneously combust. I know, Alex replied, though he didn't sound entirely convinced. It's just, when you hit that post, for a second there I thought... He trailed off, shaking his head. Thought what? Nothing. It was stupid. Alex, fine. I thought you'd really hurt yourself. Like, seriously hurt yourself. And I couldn't... I mean, if something happened to you... Jake's expression softened. Nothing's going to happen to me. We've been through worse than a volleyball accident, remember? Like that time we got lost hiking and you had to carry me 3 miles on a sprained ankle. That was different. That was my fault for reading the map upside down. Or the time I got food poisoning in Bangkok and you spent 2 days holding my hair back while I threw up everything I'd eaten since childhood. Okay, that was definitely your fault for ordering street food from a place called Suspicious Larry's Mystery Meat Emporium. The point is, Jake said, reaching out to grip Alex's shoulder with his good hand, we look out for each other. That's what friends do. That's what we do. In the monitoring station, Dr. Vortak felt something click into place in his understanding. This wasn't pack dynamics or predatory behavior or even basic survival instinct. This was something his species had no equivalent for. Something that didn't fit into any of their neat biological categories. This was friendship. Pure, uncomplicated, and apparently powerful enough to override every natural instinct these apex predators possessed. Ambassador, he said quietly, I need to revise my report. Humans aren't just pack hunters who happen to form social bonds. They form social bonds that are stronger than their hunting instincts. They've weaponized loyalty, sir. Through the speakers, they could hear Jake and Alex planning their next few days, discussing everything from physical therapy exercises to what they were going to have for lunch. Normal, mundane, utterly human concerns that somehow made them seem both more dangerous and less threatening than any species the Galactic Council had ever encountered. Fisher, Ambassador Quelix said slowly, might be the most terrifying thing I've ever heard. 2 weeks later, Ambassador Quillette stood before the assembled Galactic Council, his presentation materials neatly organized and his confidence in tatters. The holographic display behind him showed his original classification report for humanity, complete with 17 different warning labels and a recommendation that Earth be quarantined for the safety of all civilized species. He was about to recommend the exact opposite. Honored counselors, he began, his voice carrying the weight of someone who had stared into the abyss and discovered it was making terrible jokes and offering to share its snacks. I must formally request a complete reclassification of the species known as humans. Chancellor Vrexte, a dignified representative of the Crystalline Collective, leaned forward with interest. Have they proven to be more dangerous than initially assessed? Not exactly, Your Honor. They've proven to be dangerous in completely different ways than we understood. Kalex activated his presentation, and the first slide appeared, showing Jake and Alex during their volleyball demonstration. Our initial classification was based on standard predator species behavior patterns. Humans demonstrate exceptional physical capabilities, aggressive territorial instincts, and highly developed hunting strategies. However, we failed to account for a crucial factor, which is, they've evolved beyond basic predator behavior. Humans have developed what they call friendship into something resembling a tactical advantage. The council chamber erupted in confused murmurs. Quellex waited for silence before continuing, "Observe." The hologram shifted to show footage of Alex treating Jake's injury. When faced with a wounded pack member, standard predator protocols would dictate either abandonment or elimination to prevent the weakness from compromising group survival. Humans do the opposite. They become more protective, more resourceful, and significantly more dangerous to anything they perceive as a threat to their injured companion. Chancellor Vrexta's crystalline features somehow managed to convey skepticism. Surely this behavior has evolutionary disadvantages. Protecting the weak should result in species decline. That's what we thought. But their historical records suggest otherwise. Kellic pulled up another slide showing human military statistics. When humans fight for abstract concepts like territory or resources, their effectiveness follows predictable patterns. But when they fight to protect each other, their combat effectiveness increases by an average of 300%. The murmurs grew louder. Council member Zephyr of the Aquatic Territories raised a tentacle. Are you suggesting their emotional attachments make them more efficient killers? I'm suggesting their emotional attachments make them willing to become efficient killers when necessary, Quellex corrected. The human Alex demonstrated medical knowledge, strategic thinking, and protective instincts that would put our best military specialists to shame. And he deployed all of those capabilities for one reason, because his friend was hurt. The hologram switched to footage from Jake's recovery period, showing Alex's 3-day vigil. Furthermore, they maintain these protective behaviors even when there's no immediate threat. The human Alex sacrificed sleep, comfort, and personal time to ensure his friend's recovery, with no expectation of reward or reciprocal behavior. That makes no sense, declared Council Member Thrix of the Hive Collectives. Altruistic behavior without genetic or tactical benefits should have been eliminated by natural selection, unless, Quellex said, advancing to his final slide, the altruistic behavior itself provides the tactical benefit. Humans who know their companions will protect them are willing to take greater risks, explore more dangerous territories, and engage in conflicts they would never attempt alone. Their friendship doesn't make them weak. It makes them collectively more formidable than the sum of their individual capability. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. I've prepared a revised classification recommendation, Kula continued. Humans should be designated as a Class 7 strategic pack bonding species, with a special notation for weaponized loyalty syndrome. They are potentially extremely dangerous, but only to perceived threats. To allies they appear to be, well, actually quite pleasant. Chancellor Vrexta processed this for several long moments. And your recommendation for diplomatic relations? Full acceptance into the Galactic Council, with the understanding that betraying a human's trust would be spectacularly stupid. On the other hand, earning their loyalty appears to result in the most fiercely protective allies in known space, who will serve as our liaisons for formal relations. Quellex smiled, and for the first time in weeks, it was genuine. The humans Jake and Alex have volunteered to serve as Earth's first official ambassadors. Jake has apparently recovered fully from his injury, and Alex has promised to teach me something called camping, which he assures me is much more fun than it sounds. Camping? It's a recreational activity where humans voluntarily sleep outdoors and tell stories around fires. Alex calls them hunting stories, but based on my observations, they're actually humorous anecdotes about outdoor mishaps and questionable decision-making. Chancellor Vrexta's crystalline structure somehow managed to convey amusement. And you're looking forward to this? Krelix considered the question seriously. 2 weeks ago, the idea of voluntarily spending time with apex predators would have sent him into therapeutic hibernation. Now, the prospect of hearing Jake and Alex argue about proper tent assembly while eating something called s'mores around a campfire actually sounded nice. You know what, Your Honor? I actually am. The motion to accept humanity into the Galactic Council passed by unanimous vote, though several members requested detailed briefings on proper friendship protocol before any formal meetings were scheduled. Later that day, Kellex received a message from Earth. It was from Alex, informing him that Jake had suggested they start their camping trip with something called fishing, which was apparently a human recreational activity that involved sitting quietly by water for hours while hoping something edible would volunteer to be caught. Quelix sent back a reply asking if he needed to bring his own weapons. Alex's response was immediate. LOL, no, just bring sunscreen and patience. Jake's terrible at fishing, so we'll probably end up ordering pizza anyway. Quelix had no idea what pizza was, but he found himself looking forward to finding out. Some species, he reflected, were just full of pleasant surprises.